So I want you to picture a split screen. I want you to visualize this really clearly in your mind.
Okay, a split screen. What are we looking at?
On the left side of the screen, you have a press conference. It's January 6th, 2026, just a few weeks ago. You've got the newly inaugurated Mayor Zohran Mamdani, and you've got Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch standing next to him. And the vibes are immaculate.
Champagne popping.
Metaphorically, yes. They are taking a victory lap. They are beaming. They are announcing to the press corps that 2025 was, and I'm quoting here, the safest year ever regarding gun violence in the history of New York City.
The safest year ever? That's a huge claim.
It's a massive claim. And they have the charts to prove it right. Everything's pointing down. Shootings down 24%, murders down over 20%. Subway crime is supposedly at its lowest level since 2009. The graphics are blue and crisp. Everyone is smiling.
Okay, so that's the left side of the screen. Official reality. What's on the right side?
On the right side, you have the view from my apartment window. Or, your walk to the subway this morning. You have the citizen app alerts blowing up your phone every 20 minutes.
Right.
You have that feeling that if you make eye contact with the wrong person on the A train, things are going to go south very, very quickly. You have the bodegas locking up deodorant and ice cream behind plexiglass.
It is a tale of two realities. One exists in a spreadsheet at City Hall, and the other exists on the pavement when you're walking your dog.
Exactly. And that is what we are deep diving into today. Because the gap between those two realities, what the government tells us is happening and what we all actually feel is happening, it's never been wider. And frankly, looking at this stack of documents you've brought, it feels like we're being gaslit.
It's a strong word, gaslighting. But when you look at the sources we have in front of us today, we're talking internal city council reports, data from emergency rooms that directly contradicts police data, even surveys from retired police captains. I mean, it is really hard to come to a different conclusion.
The thesis we're exploring today is something called arrest avoidance as a statistical strategy. And the argument, when you really get into it, is pretty terrifying. Did crime actually go down in New York City?
Or did the administration just stop writing it down?
That's the paradox of 2026. You have a government telling you, unequivocally, you are safe. The numbers prove it. And you have a population, a huge part of the population that feels this rising sense of disorder, anxiety, and just lawlessness.
And what we're going to unpack today is that this disconnect, it isn't an accident. It isn't just a vibe shift, as some people might say. It is a deliberate statistical strategy.
We're told to trust the science, right? Trust the data. But what happens when the data is designed to lie to you?
Well, to understand why this is happening, we have to start with a concept that I know it sounds a little dry, but it's actually the key that unlocks this entire mess. It's called Campbell's Law.
Okay, I saw this in the notes. This is sociology principle.
Yeah, exactly. Donald Campbell, back in the 70s, he had this brilliant and kind of cynical theory. He said, the more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision-making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures.
Okay, you got to translate that for me. That sounds like academic word salad.
I know. Let's make it simple. Let's say you run a school. And you tell your teachers your end-of-year bonus and whether you even keep your job next year depends entirely on how many of your students get an A.
Okay, I'm following. A very high-stakes situation for the teachers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think happens?
Well, suddenly, you're going to have a lot of kids getting A's.
And is that because all the kids in your school suddenly became geniuses overnight?
No, of course not. It's because the teachers started grading easier, or they only taught the specific questions on the test. Or, in a worst-case scenario, they just changed the answers on the Scantron sheet.
Precisely. The moment a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. The goal shifts from educating students to producing A's.
And in New York City, the measure is the crime rate, specifically the 7 major index crimes.
And the target is getting reelected or getting promoted. Mayor Mamdani and Commissioner Tisch need the crime numbers to be down to prove that their policies are working. So the entire system, from the top down, finds a way to make crime go down on paper.
So what we're saying today, and we're going to back this up with data, is that the Democratic government of New York City isn't necessarily solving crime.
They're defining it out of existence.
And honestly, after reading all of this, I'm just sitting here thinking, we do not trust you. We do not trust these statistics. The feeling from the street seems to be, we see what's happening, your numbers don't match.
And you know what? We shouldn't trust them. The data suggests we absolutely shouldn't.
All right, let's get into the meat of it. Section 1, we're calling this zombie statistics. And honestly, when I first read this report from the City Council data team, I thought it was a typo. I actually had to read the paragraph 3 times to make sure I was understanding it.
You're talking about the clearance rate scandal.
Yes. So for everyone listening, let's establish the baseline. A clearance rate is supposed to be the gold standard of police work, right? It's their report card.
Theoretically, yes. It's supposed to measure efficiency. A crime happens. That's the complaint. The police catch the person who did it. That's the arrest or the clearance. So if there are 10 murders in a month and you arrest 5 of the murderers, you have a 50% clearance rate.
Simple math. It seems straightforward.
That's how I thought it worked.
Yeah.
That's how anyone would logically think it works. But according to this city council report, which was just released in December of 2025, that is absolutely not how the NYPD was doing the math.
It's
mind-boggling.
It is. So up until a very recent reform, we're talking about a bill called Intro 1237A that just passed. The NYPD had let's call it a creative way of using the calculator.
Creative accounting?
Very. They were calculating their clearance rate by taking the total arrests made in a given quarter, regardless of when the crime actually happened.
Okay.
And dividing that number by the complaints that were filed in that specific quarter. Okay, pause right there. Walk me through exactly why that is so misleading. Because on the surface, arrests divided by crimes, it still sounds kind of right.
Okay, let's use an analogy. Imagine you have a credit card bill for this month, for January. You spent, let's say, $1,000 on groceries, rent, your Con Ed bill.
Right, my current expenses.
Your current expenses. But you also found an old checkbook in a drawer and you send the bank a check for $2,000. But that check is to pay off a bunch of debt you racked up back in 2021.
Okay, so I'm paying off old debt.
Right. Under the NYPD's old math, the bank would look at your account and say, wow, you paid off 200% of your bill this month. You are a financial genius. You're actually making money.
But I'm not. I'm just cleaning up an old mess. I still have $1,000 of new debt from this month. It's completely separate.
Exactly. And that is what these are. They're zombie arrests. The police are cracking cold cases from 2018, 2021, whenever, which is great. We absolutely want them to solve cold cases. That's good police work.
Of course.
But they were taking those old arrests and counting them against the current crime stats. They were using a success from 5 years ago to make it seem like the detectives working today are solving crimes the instant they happen.
The numbers in the report are they're almost laughable if they weren't so serious. Let's look at the specific data point they cite. Manhattan, Q4 2023. This is the murder clearance rate. What was the official number that the NYPD was bragging about?
The official unadjusted number that the chiefs got to stand up at a press conference and brag about was 130.8%.
130.8%.
Yeah.
They solved more murders than actually happened in that quarter.
Yes. That right there should have been a giant flashing red flag for every journalist, every city council member, everyone. If a baseball player is batting 1.300, you don't celebrate him. You test him for drugs.
Right. He's cheating.
He's cheating. But the system, the CompStat system, was designed to absorb that anomaly. They presented it as, look how incredibly efficient we are.
So when the city council data team finally scripted out the zombies, when they went in and said, okay, show us the real number, only show me murders that happened in this quarter that were also solved in this quarter, what did that number become?
The real number was 69.2%.
Wow. From 130 down to 69.
That is a gap of over 61 percentage points.
That's not a rounding error. That's not a slight miscalculation. That is a completely different reality. It's the difference between an A+ and, frankly, a D.
It creates what the report calls a massive false sense of success. If I'm a citizen and the mayor tells me, don't worry, our detectives catch 130% of murderers, I feel pretty safe walking home at night. I think the police are basically omniscient.
But the reality is that for the crimes happening right now, nearly a third of them are not being solved in real time. The person who committed that murder is still on the street.
The data was lying to you, and it was lying by a mile.
And that's just for murder. And murder is the hardest crime to hide because, well, there's a body.
Usually, yes. It's hard to make a body disappear from the stats.
But when you get into other violent crimes, like assaults, things get even murkier. There's this incredible study from Eterno and Silverman that you pulled. They call it the Great Divergence.
This is where the story shifts from, bad math to a genuinely dangerous reality. Because a spreadsheet can lie. You can delete a row in Excel. You can cook the books on a clearance rate. But you cannot delete a body in the emergency room.
So what did these researchers do?
It was simple and it was brilliant. They compared two data sets that should move together in perfect harmony. They took the official NYPD reports for felony assaults, and then they went and got the data from hospitals for people coming into the ER with assault-related injuries.
So stab wounds, gunshot wounds, broken jaws, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And basic logic would dictate that those two lines on a graph should be parallel. If felony assaults go down by 10%, then assault-related ER visits should also go down by roughly 10%.
Right. Fewer people being assaulted means fewer people bleeding in the ER.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Right. But that is not what happened. In the period that they studied, the police were popping the champagne, they were celebrating, they reported a roughly 50% drop in felony assaults. The headlines were all, "New York is safer."
Okay, so that's the official story. What did the hospitals say?
The hospitals showed a 90% increase in assault-related visits during that same period.
Wait, say that again. Police are claiming assaults are down 50%.
Down 50.
And hospitals are seeing an increase of 90%.
It's a complete inversion of reality. The two data sets aren't just diverging, they're moving in opposite directions. And it gets worse. When they isolated for firearms assaults specifically, the gap was even more terrifying.
What were those numbers?
Firearms assaults presenting the ER surged by 129% during the exact same period the police were claiming that shootings were dropping.
That's chilling. Because that means people are getting shot. They are bleeding. They are going to the doctor to get stitched up or have a bullet removed. But somehow, these violent events are vanishing. They're disappearing into thin air before they ever hit the official police crime index.
This is what criminologists call the dark figure of crime.
It sounds ominous.
It is. It represents the vast, unlit space between crimes that actually happen and crimes that get officially recorded.
And the latest data we have from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, this was a 2024 report, it showed that nationwide, only about 48% of violent victimizations are even reported to the police in the first place.
Less than half. So for every 2 people who get mugged, only 1 even bothers to call the cops.
Less than half. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that in a city like New York, that number is dropping even lower because of something called victim fatigue.
I think I have that. I think I have victim fatigue just reading these reports. I think we all do. But strictly speaking, it's the belief that calling 911 is, frankly, a waste of your time. If you get punched on the subway or someone snatches your phone, you do this quick mental math.
Right. You think, okay, if I call the cops, I have to wait for them to show up, which could be an hour. Then I have to file a report. They might look at me like I'm bothering them. They might even try to talk me out of it. And after all that, the chance they'll actually catch the guy is probably close to 0.
Exactly. So what do? You just go home, you put some ice on your face, you call your bank to cancel your cards, and you move on with your life.
And on Mayor Mamdani's official city dashboard, that counts as a safe day. No crime was recorded.
Precisely. If a crime falls in the forest and no one files a report, it didn't happen. And that brings us to the actual mechanism of how the police encourage that silence. Because it's not just that people are feeling tired or cynical, it's that the system itself is actively pushing back against taking these reports.
Which leads us directly into our second section, because you mentioned talking people out of filing reports.
Yeah.
This isn't just accidental underreporting by the public. This sounds like systematic manipulation from inside the department. We're talking about cooking the books.
We have to talk about CompStat, computer statistics. It was introduced back in the 90s as a way to use data to track crime hotspots. And it was revolutionary at the time. It really was.
But it's changed.
Over the last 30 years, under successive administrations, and it's been heavily utilized by the current Democratic leadership, it has mutated. It has become less of a tool for fighting crime and more of a tool of internal pressure, a weekly ritual of humiliation for precinct commanders.
And we have sources that back this up. I mean, this survey of retired NYPD captains is just staggering. Over 50% of them admitted on the record that they knew about stats manipulation. That is half of the department's leadership saying, yeah, the numbers are bogus.
And the primary mechanism for this manipulation is what insiders call the downgrade. This is the dark art of taking a serious felony and, with a few keystrokes, turning it into a minor misdemeanor. Or even better, turning a misdemeanor into nothing at all.
Give us some classic examples. How does this look in practice? Walk me through a scenario.
Okay, let's take grand larceny. That's a felony. It's one of the 7 major index crimes that City Hall obsesses over. Let's say you are walking down Broadway, someone bumps into you, it feels a little weird, and a minute later you realize your wallet is gone. You had $1,200 cash in there because you were on your way to buy a used couch off Craigslist.
Okay, that sucks. And that's a felony.
That is grand larceny, a felony. So you go to the local precinct to file a report. Now, the officer at the desk, he knows that if he logs another grand larceny, his commander is going to get yelled at in the CompStat meeting on Friday because grand larceny is up by 1 for the month.
So his own self-preservation kicks in. He doesn't want his boss to get screamed at.
Exactly. The pressure flows downhill. So he might lean in and say, look, are you sure it was stolen? Are you 100% positive? I mean, maybe it just fell out of your pocket. You know, if we file a grand larceny report, it's a whole process. You have to come back. You have to talk to detectives. You might have to view a lineup. It takes hours. We could just file it as lost property. You get a report number for your insurance company right now, and you can be on your way in 5 minutes.
And lost property isn't a crime. It doesn't show up in CompStat.
It vanishes. The crime rate just went down. Or take a burglary. Someone jimmies the lock on your apartment building's front door and steals all the packages from the foyer. That's a felony burglary. But if the officer who responds records it as criminal trespass, it's just a misdemeanor.
And misdemeanors don't trigger the same alarms at City Hall.
They're essentially ignored in the top-line statistics that the mayor talks about. And we have documented proof of this. The Adrian Schoolcraft recordings from inside the 81st precinct. This is one of the most damning pieces of evidence we have.
This was the officer who secretly recorded his superiors, right?
Yes. And you can hear supervisors on tape explicitly ordering officers to fudge the numbers, to avoid taking felony reports. An internal report on the 81st precinct found multiple cases where the key phrase, intent to commit a crime, was deliberately removed from burglary narratives. By deleting just 5 words from the report, a felony becomes a minor nuisance.
It's like they're not police officers anymore. They're creative writing students. They're just editing reality to fit the assignment.
And it creates barriers for victims. We saw evidence where robbery victims were told they couldn't file a report unless they agreed to come back and view lineups immediately. They make it so difficult and so inconvenient to be a victim that you just give up and go away.
And here's the kicker. It's not that the streets are safer. It is that the paperwork is lighter.
The administration, Mayor Mondani, Commissioner Tisch, they stand at that podium and they say with a straight face, crime is down. But the truth, the reality that these documents show is that reporting is down. And when you strip away the corrupted reporting, what are you left with?
You're left with the street.
You're left with the street, and the street tells a very, very different story.
Which brings us perfectly to Roosevelt Avenue. Because if you want to see the complete failure of statistics versus reality, you don't need a spreadsheet. You just have to take a walk in Queens. This is Section 3, the Roosevelt Avenue Case Study.
This is the red light district reality, and it is so vital that we discuss this because it highlights the specific failure of the Mamdani administration's ideology. We are pivoting from the quantitative illusion to the pavement.
The descriptions in the sources we have are just wild. They talk about casas de muñecas, doll houses, buildings with blocked-off windows. We were talking about open solicitation for sex in broad daylight, right next to fruit stands and bakeries.
And the numbers of people involved are exploding. The estimates we have show an increase from about 75 sex workers operating on that strip 2 years ago to over 185 in early 2025. That is more than double in just 24 months.
And the community is screaming about this. We pulled comments from local forums, Reddit threads. Residents are describing it not as a neighborhood anymore, but as a community gathering for illicit activity. They talk about human trafficking happening in plain sight, disguised as massage parlors, opening up right next to legitimate family-owned businesses.
And this is where the policy of arrest avoidance becomes so tangible and so dangerous. Think about it from a CompStat perspective. If the police simply stop arresting people for prostitution, what happens to the prostitution crime statistic?
It goes to zero.
It goes to zero. A layman or a politician looks at the chart and says, incredible, we have solved the problem of prostitution in Queens. But the resident who has to walk their child to school past that corner looks out their window and sees a full-blown open-air brothel operating on their street.
And this isn't just an accident. This is specifically tied to Mayor Mondani's stated policy, correct?
It is intentional. This is a direct result of his policy. Mayor Mamdani has adopted what many call a de Blasio-style approach of minimal enforcement. They have explicitly stopped the raids. The focus is now on root causes and social work rather than handcuffs.
The phrase he's used in the past is sex work is work. That's the ideological foundation for this.
Yes, exactly. Mamdani has a long history of supporting something called Cecilia's Law, which calls for the full decriminalization of the sex trade. At the same time, he refuses to endorse the Nordic model, which would criminalize the buyers, the Johns, and the traffickers.
So by redefining this public disorder as a labor issue, by calling it work, what does that do?
It allows the administration to abdicate all responsibility. It's no longer a crime problem they have to solve. It's a workers' rights issue. But in doing so, they completely ignore the chaos and the exploitation it creates for the community and for the women involved.
And critics are saying this is basically hanging a giant neon sign over the city that says, "Open for business to traffickers."
And the evidence suggests that's exactly what's happening. When you have transnational gangs, our sources are referencing the 18th Street Gang, Venezuelan TCOs. They are not stupid. They see a city that refuses to arrest people for these crimes. They see a market that is essentially unprotected by law enforcement.
It creates a vacuum.
Precisely. The government says we aren't arresting these women because we want to protect them from the criminal justice system. But by abandoning the street, they are leaving these vulnerable women to be exploited by violent traffickers without any fear of police intervention. Chaos fills a vacuum. A 0% arrest rate doesn't mean the problem is solved. It means the problem is being completely and utterly ignored.
This connects so directly to the broader ideology of this administration. So let's zoom out a bit. Section 4. Socialist Mamdani and the prevention model. We need to really talk about who is running the city and why they think this way.
Mayor Zohran Mamdani is a democratic socialist. His entire political identity, his transition team, his governance philosophy, it's all built on a very specific ideological shift away from traditional policing. They believe in what they call the prevention model.
Which, on paper, it sounds good. Of course we want to prevent crime before it happens. Who wouldn't want that?
Right. But to the resident who is dealing with an immediate danger, the person whose car just got broken into, or the shop owner dealing with constant theft, it feels like a complete betrayal. The sentiment we are seeing over and over again in our sources is this deep, pervasive feeling of, we do not trust you. You are not keeping us safe now.
And one of the biggest flashpoints for this has been the SRG, the Strategic Response Group.
Mamdani campaigned on a promise to disband the SRG. For listeners who don't know, this is the NYPD's elite unit. They're the ones responsible for counterterror and handling large-scale protests and riots. He views them as a symbol of overly aggressive, militarized policing.
So he wants to remove the muscle of the NYPD.
He wants to remove the muscle and replace it with a brand new agency called the Department of Community Safety. The idea is to take social service roles like dealing with the homeless or mental health crises away from the police.
Again, academically, you can make an argument for that.
You can. But in practice, what you're doing is creating sprawling, parallel bureaucracies, while the actual police force that's supposed to respond to 911 calls faces burnout, low morale, and what one of our sources calls professional impotence. They feel like they're not allowed to do their jobs.
And it creates this huge disconnect. Mamdani stands up and says, safety means economic stability. Talks about rent freezes, free buses, things like that.
And those are fine economic policies to debate. But rent control does not stop a mugging on the subway. A free bus ride does not close down an illegal brothel that's operating next to your child's school. This is what we're calling the public safety paradox.
The sources mention that while the big one, shootings, is officially down, the disorder crimes are through the roof. What was that motor vehicle theft number?
Motor vehicle theft is still 191% higher than it was in 2019.
191%.
Let that sink in. If you own a car in the city, you are almost 3 times more likely to have it stolen today than you were just a few years ago. Retail theft continues to be a persistent, massive problem for businesses. But because that one metric, shootings, is down, the administration takes a victory lap.
They're cherry-picking the one statistic that makes them look good and completely ignoring the daily erosion of quality of life for millions of people.
It is gaslighting. It is the government looking you in the eye and telling you that what you see every day isn't real. Your lying eyes are deceiving you. Trust our spreadsheet.
So let's bring this all together. Section 5, the crisis of accountability. Because this isn't just about a bad policy here or there. It's about a fundamental breakdown in the culture inside the police department itself and in its relationship with the public.
We have to return to that source, the quantitative illusion. It paints this really bleak picture of the modern police officer. They're not a peacekeeper anymore. They're not an investigator. They're a data entry clerk.
Their primary goal isn't to keep the peace. It's to feed the machine.
Feed CompStat. This is the end point. of metric fixation.
Yeah.
When a mayor, specifically a mayor like Mamdani, who comes into office deeply skeptical of police power, demands that crime numbers must go down, but at the same time, he disallows all the traditional tools of aggressive policing.
Like stop and frisk, or getting rid of the SRG.
Then the only way left for the police hierarchy to satisfy that demand from City Hall is to manipulate the data. It is the only lever they have left to pull. And this creates what they call a juking culture.
It's the Vietnam body count analogy all over again.
It is, or it's no child left behind for policing. They are teaching to the test. They're managing the handful of index crime numbers at all costs while ignoring the total health and safety of the city.
And this leads to what the sources are calling social worrying. It's this pervasive anxiety. And it begs the question, how long will we bear with it? How long can this go on?
That is the question, isn't it? The social contract is fundamentally eroding. If the government's primary role is to provide safety, and they tell you it's safe, but you are afraid to walk home from the subway at night, then that government has broken its bond with the people.
And we touched on this earlier, but it's worth reemphasizing the gang connection, the 18th Street Gang, the TCOs.
These transnational criminal organizations are sophisticated. They read the news. They monitor policy. They know that New York City has adopted an arrest avoidance strategy, especially when it comes to quality of life crimes and certain migrant populations. They're actively exploiting that loophole.
So this illusion of safety isn't just a spreadsheet error that makes us feel uneasy. It's a structural weakness that is creating an open door for organized crime.
Correct. When you decide, as a matter of ideology, that you will not enforce the law because you believe in prevention over punishment, you don't get a social utopia. You get a power vacuum. And gangs and criminal enterprises are more than happy to fill that vacuum.
So what does this all mean? We have a mayor saying, safest year ever. We have residents seeing and feeling chaos. We have a police department that appears to be cooking the books to bridge that impossible gap.
It means we are flying blind. We do not have accurate data on which to make decisions. We have political data. The numbers that are being presented to the public are not a tool for the people to understand their city. They are a shield for the administration.
It really, really makes you question everything you hear from City Hall, every press conference, every report.
We should question it. We must question it because arrest avoidance at the end of the day is a political strategy. It is a way to win an election or to survive a press conference. It is not a way to keep a family safe on their way to school.
Which brings us back to the central question. If the only way to lower the crime rate is to stop calling things crimes, have we actually solved the problem?
Or have we just surrendered the city? I think the answer, sadly, is waiting for you on the corner of Roosevelt Avenue.
So ask yourself, when you look out your window, do you see a spreadsheet or do you see the street?
Trust your eyes, not the press release.
Until next time, keep your eyes open and question the count.